Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our read-along of Nicholas Montserrat's 1951 best-selling book, The Cruel Sea. His best-selling book in his career, the best thing he ever wrote, in my opinion. The story of the Compass Rose, which is a corvette, a small, ungainly, largely slovenly seagoing vessel designed to drop depth charges, designed to be part of a convoy that protects civilian shipping during the early years of World War II. We are following the Compass Rose and its crew. It's Captain Erickson, it's his sub-lieutenants, Morrill and Farabee, and the various crew members under them as they go through first the learning experience of how to work a corvette and what convoy duty is like, and then their experiences of the war, including the devastating realizations of just how bad this is going to get, how this is not going to be an affair that's over by Christmas. And that's where we are when we reach the year 1942. The section that we're reading today is called Fighting. And it is full of scene setting for a seasoned crew. This is Montserrat describing a ship and a crew that have thoroughly accustomed themselves to the routine of their war, which is to use increasingly advanced surveillance equipment to detect German U-boats in time to deter them from attacking the convoy and maybe to sink a few. But of course, this puts the Compass Rose in the way of a lot of weird wartime experiences. And we'll get to those, but I want to describe Montserrat's... I want to read his description of how the war has changed these men. I want to read a couple of those because they are not the same characters that we met 2 sections ago. Each leave, they get a long overdue, long awaited shore leave. Each leave was different from the last one, a development or a stultification of which had gone before. In war, nothing stood still in any part of the field. In this war, the years were passing, eating up not only men and treasure, but bearing swiftly onward the normal tide of life as well. Nothing stood still. Nothing waited for peacetime before moving on to the next chapter. Men grew older, the women loved them more or less, or fell in love again. Babies were born, cooking deteriorated, mortgages fell due, uncle died and left that funny will, mother came to live, the paint flaked off the bathroom ceiling, and sometimes, with distance and separation, it was difficult to do anything about the paint or the baby or the loving more or less. The men just had to hope and trust and be reassured or betrayed and take whatever they found when they got back. Distances were too great and the thread sometimes too tenuous for them to play an effective part at home as well as at sea, and the sea had the priority, whether they liked it or not. And whether they like it or not comes into play in the next description of this same phenomenon, where we're told life in corvettes had claimed them altogether. There were times when each man was, for days or weeks at a stretch, reduced or perhaps exalted to nothing more than a pair of strained eyes, a pair of sea boots anchoring him to the deck, and a life belt snugly clamped round his waist. And fortunately, as with the last group description that we got, that's not entirely true. We are not reduced in the halfway point of this book to reading about automatons. Montserrat promises us that at the beginning of the last section that we read and then does not deliver it. And he promises that again in this section and does not deliver it. Instead, we get our characters. They are more seasoned. They are more callous. And we see some of the things that make them that way. Montserrat gives us some great adventures that the Compass Rose has. He doesn't take us through those adventures in chronological real time. Instead, he recounts them as chapters in the great book of the Compass Rose. The time when they find a dead ship, for instance. No one on board, meals uneaten on the table. The ship is still seaworthy, it's still floating, but no sign of what happened to the captain or the crew. And the Compass Rose has to take possession of it and figure out what to do with it. Or the case of the skeleton survivors, where they find a ring of dead and desiccated bodies in the water linked by a lifeline to each other. And Morrill, one of the one of the sub-lieutenants wonders, just imagines what it must have been like for the first person to die in that ring, or the second person, or God forbid, the last person when all the others are dead. And they're just drifting around on the open ocean, no hope of rescue, dying of exposure or God knows what. And those are the lucky cases. We also get a harrowing scene that does get narrated in real time of dealing with the victims of war, with dealing with what happens when you rescue crewmen alive out of the water who have been battered by concussions or stripped by gunfire or burned horribly by burning oil. There's a terrific scene where one of our characters has to minister to such a person when he has exposed ribs. He is certainly not going to live. There isn't the medical technology within 200 miles to save his life. But you can't just say that. You can't just chuck him over the side. You have to try. So the whole time that the medic is trying, he is also in his mind wishing, and Montserrat puts it in all capital letters, die. He's wishing, just die. Just stop fighting and die. You know you're going to. There's nothing I do to help you. So just die. And eventually, we're told the crewman obligingly does, but only after mind-numbing horror. And our crew goes on leave, and they have various domestic upheavals, an unfaithful wife, a maybe too faithful wife, the presence of a mother-in-law, etc., etc. And in a way, during those domestic moments, those domestic scenes, we get the sense, odd as it is, that a lot of our characters, even confirmed civilians like Farabee, are in an odd way yearning to get back to sea. It really has, in that way, it really has commanded their lives, or commandeered their lives anyway. And so when their leave is up, they come on board and they reestablish the lines of discipline, and they launch, and they're struck by a torpedo and sunk in a minute. Happens in the middle of the book. Montserrat pays you, the reader, the huge compliment of not foreshadowing it in any way. He tells you this is a dangerous war, but he also lulls you into thinking you're going to be with the adventures of the Compass Rose forever. The ship is struck by a torpedo and sinks in minutes. And who lives and who dies is solely a question of happenstance. All the drilling, all the preparing that they did, nope. The shot cripples the stairwells. If you're on deck or on the conning tower, you live. If you're not, you don't. Simple as that. Just random chance. That's to say nothing of what happens to you once you get into a life raft or a lifeboat and get out on the open ocean. But in the initial instant, the fates of everyone are decided, including characters that we've come to know. The captain lives. Our core crew lives. They all happen to be on the bridge at the right time. But characters that we have come to know well don't live. They die, and that's it. That's all there is to it. And then our survivors are on the open water. It's a stunningly confident move on the part of Nicholas Montserrat. It is a stunningly confident narrative move. Not only to have his ship and his crew torpedoed in 1942, with half the book still to go, but also not to warn you about it in any way. It's consummately well done. And it is incredibly abrupt. It is the torpedo struck the Compass Rose when she was moving at almost her full speed. She was therefore mortally torn by the sea as well as by the violence of the enemy. She was hit squarely about 12 feet from her bows. There was one slamming explosion, and the noise of ripping and tearing metal, and the fatal sound of seawater flooding in under great pressure. A blast of heat from the stricken forecastle rose to the bridge like a hideous waft of incense. Compass Rose veered wildly from her course and came to a shaking stop, like a dog with a bloody muzzle. Her bows were very nearly blown off, and her stern was already starting to cant in the air almost before the way was off the ship. So we're not going to get a slow, steady death. We've seen, the Compass Rose has seen herself, Montserrat has narrated for us, how quick this happens. Sometimes, sure, ships get struck in the wrong place and they linger for a long time. But far more often, they get struck in some vital spot and with totally unaware and go down in minutes. And that's what happens to our ship. It's not just the men who've been commandeered by the rhythms of this war. By this point in the book, we, the reader, have also been commandeered. And suddenly, we don't have a ship. Suddenly, Erickson and his crew are in lifeboats. And Montserrat finishes that way. He finishes the chapter that way. How does he put it? Let's read that. The wind blew chill in their faces. The water slopped and broke in small ice-cold waves against the rafts. The harnessed fringe of dead men swayed like dancers. They're dead men hanging to the sides. They don't last long in North Atlantic waters. The sun was coming up now to add dreadful detail. It showed the rafts, horrible in themselves, to be only single items in a whole waste of cruel water, on which countless bodies rolled and labored amid countless bits of wreckage, adrift under the bleak sky. All around them, on the oily, fouled surface, the wretched flotsam, all that was left of the compass rose, hurt and shamed the eye. The picture of the year, thought Lockhart, mourning with corpses. And so Viperous found them. Viperous is the destroyer that they've been in convoy with, and it comes too late, of course, to do anything except save these men, get them out of the water. Lockhart lives. Farabee lives. Erickson lives. Morrill dies. Many of the crewmen, the artificer, the chief engineer, they all die. That's just it. They don't get any heroic last moments. They don't get any heroic scenes. We see some final moments of some of the people in the water, and some of those moments are horrible. Some of them are villainous, murderous. And then it's all over. And the sun comes up on the wreckage, and there's nothing left, and that's that. And the book is halfway done. We're halfway through the book. So we're going to move on. We're going to see what Nicholas Montserrat has in store for us. So we will read part 5 next, 1943, The Moment of Balance. That will be the next thing that we read in The Cruel Steve, our read-along of The Cruel Sea. And I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you're all enjoying it so far. So far, the word that I have is that you are. The thing about a BookTube read-along is that it's almost always just the indulgence of the booktuber, right? It's not like I'm expecting hundreds of people to be reading this book because I'm reading it. It's really, you're indulging me, and this read-along will always be here for you. If you don't feel like reading The Cruel Sea now, maybe you don't think it's ever a book that you would like. And then maybe 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, if these videos still exist, if you can still find them, this read-along will be there as a companion for you. But still, I get the impression that a number of people are reading this. And I've had no negative words, which is great, because I don't think there's any way you can dislike this book. Once you get over your literary snobbery, a literary snob will not bother to read this at all. They'll see World War II fiction, men in ships. I don't think so. And they'll avoid it. And as I have said my whole life, their literary snobbery is not my problem. so they're only hurting themselves. They're missing out on a great book. But those of you who are reading it seem to be agreeing with me that this is terrific stuff. So, in fact, I've had a number of emails so far. I'm only halfway through the book. I've had a number of emails from people asking, is the rest of Nicholas Montserrat this good? Should I go finding the rest of his work? And it's a little bit hit and miss. He was a commercial writer. He was a professional hack. I think he knew that he struck gold with this book, and I think his publisher knew that as well. But there are definitely great moments otherwise. The Ship That Died of Shame, for instance, or HMS Marlborough Will Enter Harbor. Those are terrific stories along the lines of The Cruel Sea. But we're concerned with this novel, so we're going to read that next section next time. We won't worry about finishing neatly on the pinpoint of a month or whatever. We'll read that next section, and that leaves us, let's take a look here. So the next section we will do is 120 pages, thereabouts, and it is The Moment of Balance. Then we'll do part 6, which is Winning, and then part 7, which is The Prize. So we've just got the 3 sections left in this book. Tremendous fun, but a masterful stroke here in the midships is that we suddenly don't have a ship anymore. We still have a crew. So we will follow them and see what happens. So I will stop this now, and we'll resume this next time. Thank you, BookTube.